Hey, my friends, welcome back. We are talking today and continuing to talk about 3 things that you shouldn't miss in healing fatigue, irritable bowel, chronic pain, and a lot of the symptoms that go along with or can be associated with those things. Today, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of okay, how does a person actually heal? What do you need to do and what don't you want to miss? So listen up to this. We're going to focus today talking about your mind-body system and how foundational it is to your healing process. So a little background. The first couple of videos really talked about the complexity of your health and the complexity of disease and the different underlying physiologic imbalances that give rise to it. And we talked about a particular case. We talked about a guy who I saw. His name is Robert. He's in his 40s. He's a great guy, intelligent, sweet, motivated, really wants to do good things with his life, but he's completely stuck and can't function. He's got so much abdominal pain and digestive symptoms that he can't leave the house in the morning. He's fatigued. He can barely do stuff until the afternoon. He's got increasing anxiety. Lately, he hasn't been sleeping so well at night. And he really feels like life's getting away from him. And he's not accomplishing what he wants to accomplish in life. Okay, so here's Robert's case, like I just shared about what's going on with him. And to give an overview of what I developed in those first 2 videos, which I really encourage you to watch. They go into a lot of depth and it really might illuminate a lot to see those first 2 videos about how to understand all these things I'm about to show you. But as an overview, okay, your mind is more or less the main place that you perceive stress, danger, challenging circumstances has a profound impact on your body. And why? One of the main things is the connection of your brain and your gut. There is something called the gut-brain axis that we've known about for centuries and centuries. A lot of the early philosophers talked about all disease starts in the gut, and science is starting to finally figure that out. And pretty much every professional journal, every professional specialty is talking about gut-brain axis as it relates to diseases in rheumatology and psychiatry and orthopedics and everything. And one of the main ways is that we've got this gut-brain axis. When a person has stressful, traumatic, difficult experiences, some of the changes that we see are dysbiosis, which is a change in the actual biome of what's living in your gut, something called increased intestinal permeability, as well as a tendency towards more inflammation, both locally in the gut and systemically. It gets more complex than this, right? Because those changes affect the immune system, and you can get dysregulation of the immune system. That can show up a lot of different ways, and again, whether it's allergy, autoimmune disease, chronic illnesses that have an immune component, chronic pain which is related to immune disturbance, or a variety of other clinical issues, immune dysregulation is part of that, and we're more and more seeing that the gut is part of what drives that, and that immune dysregulation feeds back into the gut. Oxidative stress is the shift in fundamental metabolic processes or biochemical processes that happen in all of your cells that's related to immune dysregulation. And again, it's a 2-way street where they affect each other. And immune dysregulation feeds back into your brain. When a person gets a virus and feels sick and tired, it's because immune chemicals are circulating from the immune system fighting that virus or infection, and they go to your brain and they make you lie down and sleep so you can heal. But what happens when the immune system is chronically dysregulated is you get this chronic impact on the brain, which can affect things like brain fog, energy, cognitive status, and brain inflammation, which can do a lot to make you sick. And then what's going on in your brain feeds directly into your immune system. One of the biggest stimulators of your immune function is acute stress, and that actually empowers immune function. And one of the biggest things that impairs your immune function is chronic stress. So again, a 2-way street of relationship. And then immune dysregulation has an impact on pain transmission. And we learned about how pain is not just like an electrical wire. It's an electrochemical flow of information from the place that hurts to the part of your brain where you experience it, and your volume can be turned up. And then pain in itself can actually affect immune dysregulation. Wrong arrow. And that is intimately connected with what's going on in your brain and stimulating your stress response and feeding into all of this. And your cellular function, the core level of your cells, your cellular energy production, metabolism, DNA synthesis is influenced by immune dysregulation, influenced by stress and mind-body issues, and influenced by what's going on in your pain transmission system. And so this is a web of relationships. It's a cycle of relationships that evolved to protect you, but frequently is what keeps you sick. And so that's what we're going to talk about unpacking. So let's get some more layers here so you can understand what I'm talking about. So we talked a bit about the way we think about things in functional medicine as compared to conventional medicine. We think about antecedents. These are like early life stuff that set the stage. Triggers, transient events that happen in life that can shift the system, and then mediators, persistent changes in your biology, your biochemistry, your immunity, your gut function, stuff that perpetuates and keeps you sick. So antecedents like genetics and early life stress or trauma, triggers like stressors, infection, drug or chemical exposure, mediators, stuff like dysregulation of hormones, not sleeping well, stress and anxiety that persists, immune dysregulation, irritable bowel, the fundamental things that go on in irritable bowel, like pain, dysbiosis, malabsorption, inflammation, these feed into your whole system and social circumstances. And all of these changes are kind of like a process that flows downstream over time. Disease doesn't just happen. It develops over the course of months and years. And frequently there's a trigger that takes your underlying situation and shifts it. And so it starts to shift a process that perpetuates. And that's why so many people seem to have kind of a chronic thing that develops after they have some sort of injury, illness, toxic exposure, stress, or whatever it is. And then they just keep getting worse. And they go to various doctors who are treating things individually, like, oh, you got this symptom, that symptom, that symptom, but they're not looking at the underlying issues. So we're talking about treating as much as we can, going upstream, getting at the underlying issues, unwinding the cycles that make people sick and that keep you sick. Okay, so we're talking in a case of this gentleman who saw me, who's got irritable bowel, who's got chronic abdominal pain, who's not sleeping, who's got anxiety, and who's got probably some degree of chronic inflammatory stuff going on because of his irritable bowel or an association with it. And he also has hormonal dysregulation where his normal production of cortisol isn't like it should be, and it's low in the morning. These are what's going on in him, but the issue that I want you to see in this slide is that those can be underlying so many different kinds of problems. So if you've got chronic pain or fibromyalgia, abdominal pain, fatigue, depression, anxiety, migraine, headaches, neurodegenerative diseases like dementia, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, neuropathy where your nerves get sick, autoimmune diseases, chronic fatigue, these share common underlying physiologic imbalances, some of which we've talked about in this case. So what are you going to do about it? You've probably heard me talk about the 3 M's, right? And this is just what I've come up with over 20 years of practice as 3 handles or windows through which you can kind of look at your system, and you need to address all 3 of these. And if you miss 1 or 2 of these, you frequently aren't getting at the complexity of what's going on when you have a chronic illness or chronic pain. So obviously mind is your mind-body connection. Movement is your movement system. Metabolism is all of your biochemistry, your immune system, your hormones, all of that. And these all interact with each other. That's why these circles are intersecting. And what's really happening is right in the core of it where everything comes together. And to my perspective, you've also got spirit. You've got an aspect of your being that is beyond measure, that's beyond what science can put a finger on. And pretty much almost everybody in the world senses that in some way. And that's part of what influences everything too, because it might be part of what integrates everything. So let's go further and talk about this. I'm not going to try to talk about all 3 M's today. I'm going to kind of run through the metabolic biochemical stuff and run through the movement mechanical structural stuff and spend more time on the mind-body axis. And then we'll talk about those other 2 in more depth, and we'll drill down into those in the later videos. So metabolic biochemical. What's relevant for Robert, who's got the conditions we talked about? Well, first of all, diet, food sensitivities, nutrients that can actually reduce irritability of the gut, and low antigen diet that's full of antioxidants that actually tends to irritate the gut less and can help reduce inflammation and free radicals, which produce oxidative stress. We're giving some adrenal support, some botanical substances that have actually been shown in research to support mood, energy, and to have an influence on that hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is involved in our chronic stress response. There is a substance called LDN, or low-dose naltrexone, that I use with a lot of people with chronic illness. It's worth reading about and understanding. It's an off-label use of a very common drug called naltrexone, and it gets used a lot in irritable bowel, inflammation, pain, autoimmune diseases. It seems to be pretty safe. The research that we have shows that a lot of people get benefit who haven't gotten benefit from anything. So it's very relevant in my experience for irritable bowel, for inflammation, and frequently for mood. In terms of dealing with stress, we talked a bit about adrenal support, but there are nutrients that can help your body deal with stress. Stuff like B complex and magnesium, other substances that can be either depleted or support your system in dealing with stress. Addressing dysbiosis, which is that alteration in the biome that's living in the bowel, which is mainly about probiotics and prebiotics. Sometimes we get more aggressive and actually treat it with antibacterial stuff, whether it's botanical or pharmaceutical, depending on the circumstances. And then addressing leaky gut. Basically, your immune cells, which get broken down from various sources, whether it's dysbiosis, toxic drugs, toxic exposure, stress, when you feed them what they need, they frequently heal. And if what you don't feed them what they need, they often don't. And again, this is supported by various levels of research that certain things like L-glutamine and zinc and vitamin A and E and vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids help the gut heal. So let's talk about the movement mechanical system. Movement's medicine. Your body was made to move. When you get regular exercise, and regular exercise could be aerobic, stretching, strength training, or some kind of mindful movement like yoga or Tai Chi, and various other movement arts, dance, lots of different kinds of exercise, walking. It actually stimulates hormones, reduces inflammation. It can enhance sleep, reduce pain, enhance neurotransmitter function, and make you feel good. And there's a lot of depth to understand what's appropriate for you given your circumstances. Depending on your level of health, depending on how much pain you have, what kind of condition your musculoskeletal system is in. So there's subtlety to this, and I'll drill down into this some more in a later video. So let's talk about mind-body healing. And when most people think of mind-body healing, if you were to look it up on the internet, say in a biomedical web search like PubMed or something, you might see things about relaxation exercises, mindfulness, visual imagery, psychotherapy, CBT, various things like that. And these are all techniques that have been used and studied to see the effect they have on the overall stress axis, to see the effect they have on various symptoms and disease complexes. And there is a lot of research over the course of 20, 30 years that show that, you know what, these things make sense. They tend to be very low risk. Once you learn it, it tends to be very low or zero cost. And the potential benefits can be very great, especially depending on how much stress, trauma, difficult stuff goes going on and how overactive your stress response is. And certainly my own clinical experience of using these techniques for over 20 years in my own life and with lots of patients is seeing profound impact. And this is one of those things that people miss, because I see a lot of people who come in and they're doing all this nutritional stuff and maybe they're exercising and they might have chronic pain or fiber or IBS or chronic fatigue or autoimmune disease or whatever, but they're not really getting at their mind-body axis. And it's complex and it's subtle. There's a lot of reasons why not. Some people just aren't into it. For some people, there's a stigma, like whenever they've gone to a doctor over the course of years, and I've seen this with so many people, like we'll sit down and go through all the science about why mind-body medicine is really important, why it's a therapeutic tool, why it's not that you're crazy, it's not that there's something wrong with your mind, it's just that, you know what, this is a therapeutic tool that can help you. And then after, they're like, So you mean it's all in my head, doc? And, and the unfortunate thing is a lot of people have been stigmatized that way. They've had problems that their doctors couldn't understand because of their narrow perspective. And then the doctor who can't figure it out blames the patient and says, oh yeah, they're nuts. It's all in their head. They need to take an antidepressant. Whatever, it's complex. Antidepressants actually have physiologic effects that aren't just about dealing with anxiety and depression. But that's part of what this whole talk is about, that there's so much integration of the neurotransmitters that are involved in depression and anxiety, as well as a lot of other brain chemistry that are involved in actually generating and perpetuating symptoms and helping symptoms develop over time, like that wave that flows downstream. Back to our topic. These things are techniques that get used a lot, and they've been researched. And let's talk more about why, just to unpack this so you can see a little bit. Again, I talked about some of this in the previous talks, but I want you to see it here because I really want you to see how important this is, how real it is, how scientifically validated are these connections between your mind-body system and the rest of your systems as they relate to your level of health or illness. So these are some slides from a journal, the Journal of Basic and Applied Sciences, that talk about normal stress response, chronic stress pathology, and chronic stress and cortisol resistance. So this is the pathology end of things, right? Where a person's healthy, there's a connection. Physical, mental, oxidative, biochemical stress go into the brain, and a signal goes out to what we call the HPA, or hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, stimulates not only epinephrine, norepinephrine, but cortisol release. Epinephrine, norepinephrine activate your immune system. Cortisol kind of like slows down inflammation and turns off that stress-related inflammatory response so that you don't get sick, right? Because if you can imagine, if you're out in the forest and you fall down and break your leg and you got an open wound or you get injured or something like that, your immune system needs to come in for defense and repair. So it's a good thing that your immune system revs up with acute stress. But then when the stress is over, you want it to quiet down. In some circumstances, we talked a lot about this in the previous two talks, the stress doesn't turn down. And that can happen because you got ongoing stressors, you've got ongoing illness, pain, injury, an environment in your life that's stressful, dangerous, whatever it is. Or it could be that you had early life adverse childhood events that turned your stress response on overdrive so that you get triggered by an illness or injury, your stress response just gets kicked throttle on full and it keeps going. And you're like, and you start to not even notice it after a while, but meanwhile your stress response is going. And what happens there is you get kind of a disconnect in this feedback loop. And the adrenal glands are putting out cortisol in response to this chronic stress. And then that whole thing with your immune system being reactive is feeding into your brain and creating more biochemical stress from the immune overreaction. That's one of those vicious cycles. And the other thing that we've discovered over the years, because all the research, looking at, well, okay, chronic stress, it affects health. Well, maybe it's because of cortisol, but wait a second, people with chronic stress don't always have elevated cortisol, right? That was the finding. But what they've discovered is that in many cases, there's actually a loss of sensitivity to cortisol. So it's not just that the cortisol goes high. Sometimes what happens over time is the cortisol stops being elevated, because the cells are like resistant to cortisol. The receptors downregulate. So basically a person can't even mount an immune response to a stressor. And that's when people start to really burn out and get that chronic fatigue, let me say this, it's probably why people start to burn out and get that chronic fatigue, immune weakness. The guy who says, gosh, I get sick every year. Anything anybody has, I get it. I see a lot of people like that. And it's probably related to this chronic dysregulation of the HPA axis along with resistance to cortisol. So they can't even mount a proper immune response to stress. It's obviously more complicated than that, but this is part of it. So let's move forward. Let's talk about pain, whether it's abdominal pain or peripheral pain in this whole feedback loop. Stress feeds this loop we just talked about, the HPA axis, and then it feeds into what we call sensitization of spinal pathways and central pathways in the brain. And central sensitization means your brain is turned up and it's like your pain processing is turned up. And peripheral sensitization means the actual nerves in your gut or your back or your knees if you have arthritis or your nerves if you have peripheral neuropathy. They become sensitized by various biochemical changes which are all influenced by the stress response. And so this chronic stress response with all of the changes turns up sensitization in the periphery, meaning the rest of your body, as well as the central sensitization, which is your brain and spinal cord. So that's part of how pain gets worse. So, okay, that's all the bad news. Let's talk about the good news. The good news is you have a system inside of your body that's actually there to help you cope and deal, and it's probably part of how mind-body therapies can help you. And it's related to something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, here's a diagram that's coming from Frontiers in Neuroscience. And it's talking about, this is not where this is coming from, forgive me. That's from another slide. Cut that. In any event, this is just a diagram that's an anatomic slide. Here's your brain, here's your spinal cord. You've got your vagus nerve pumping out here, and it's connecting to all of your internal organs. Here it says vagus, right? And that's giving input to your heart, your lungs, all of your digestive organs. And then you have these other parasympathetic, which is the same branch. It's the, just to review again, you got your stress response and your relaxation response. Your relaxation response neurologically is mediated by your vagus nerve and some of the nerves in your brain, as well as your pelvic splanchnic nerves that go to your pelvic organs and sexual organs, and the end of your bowel. And this is all parasympathetic relaxation response. So you can send relaxation signals to your gut. And those seem to have an impact on people with leaky gut and and irritable bowel syndrome, and also people with pain. So let's unpack this some more. Maybe we'll see Dr. Bonaz's slide here in a moment. There he is. Okay, so vagus nerve to the rescue. What are we talking about? This looks complicated and technical and geeky, and it kind of is, right? But that's the way scientists think and communicate with each other, and I'm part scientist, so I can hear them. Hematoencephalic barrier. That means your blood-brain barrier, right? It means your brain is protected from your nervous system. From your immune system and from your blood and what's in it, more or less. But the point is like this, that you've got vagus nerve fibers that are going out that actually have an influence on intestinal permeability. And they have an influence on inflammation in your gut. Vagal outflow has an influence actually on the bacteria in your gut, the population of bacteria in your biome that are part of what gives rise to this gut inflammation and systemic inflammation. And so vagal outflow, when the vagus nerve starts to act and get strengthened and have increased output, it shifts a lot of the changes that give rise to complex chronic disease. This is such an important thing that most of the articles, when you look in the medical literature, you look at vagus nerve and chronic illness, and you've got companies that are investing huge amounts of money in developing vagal nerve stimulators. A lot of them are invasive things where they actually put something in your neck that stimulates your vagus nerve as it comes out, gives it like an electrical charge, and then non-invasive ones that do it through the skin. And that's all really great and cool. And there's early research that shows unbelievable things like, okay, these people had rheumatoid arthritis with really bad inflammation and deformation of their joints, and they did vagus nerve stimulation and it stopped. People with chronic pain, vagus nerve stimulation, volume turns down. People with various kinds of chronic, really difficult problems that conventional medicine often fails to deal with, and they use this invasive or non-invasive vagus nerve stimulation, and you get some degree of effect. I'm not here to push high-tech, very expensive, invasive tools that are there to stimulate your vagus nerve. I'm here to push you to consider that in between your ears, with your free choice, with your mind-body connection and your intelligence, you have the capacity to actually stimulate your vagus nerve. You have the capacity to stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system and get benefits that come from vagal nerve stimulation, which seems to do a lot to turn down the volume on chronic pain, chronic illness, chronic inflammation, and so on. Let's unpack this some more. Right. Frontiers Immunology, Dr. Bonaz, again, he loves this. I think he's developing actual stimulation devices. But he's even talking about hypnosis and meditation and acupuncture as ways to stimulate different aspects of what we call now the vagal or cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. That's stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the relaxation response, stimulates an anti-inflammatory pathway. And there's a bunch of biochemistry to it, right? The vagoparasympathetic reflex, vagus nerve, stimulates fibers that go in and elicit various kinds of neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and nicotine agonists and et cetera, et cetera. We don't want to go too much into the overwhelming detail. The point is that those things block things like tumor necrosis factor alpha. That's a cytokine. That's an inflammatory chemical that's involved in almost all of these chronic destructive illnesses like rheumatoid arthritis and chronic pain and fibromyalgia. TNF-alpha and other inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-6 are showing up as major determinants and drivers that are involved in things like diabetes and heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, dementia. Degenerative illness is inflammatory. And vagal nerve stimulation is anti-inflammatory. And that is huge. That is a potential game changer for modern medicine. What I would predict is that in 20 or 30 years, when various technologies, whether they're high-tech invasive stuff versus just knowing how to teach people to evoke the relaxation response and to get at all the aspects inside the heart and soul of a person that interrupts that relaxation response and stimulates the sympathetic or stress response. When we really learn how to do that, we have a powerful set of tools for actually changing the course of chronic illness. And that's why we're here talking about this. So let's talk a little more. We're talking a lot about how stimulating relaxation pathways affect biochemistry, affect the way the gut processes stuff, and the dysfunction in the gut that can be pro-inflammatory and create all sorts of brain toxic stuff, and how we can turn that down. We looked at various ways that that parasympathetic stimulation, relaxation response stimulation, can actually reduce inflammation systemically. But here's another aspect of it, which is a direct effect on the pain pathways. And the fact that pain is really complex, and this could be a several hours long conference in itself to talk about the complexity of pain and chronic pain. But the point that I want you to know is perceived pain is profoundly integrated with emotional distress and maladaptive belief systems. And these are things that most of us don't really get taught how to deal with. My own experience over 20 years is teaching people how to deal with these things and seeing profound influences on not just perceived pain, but the amount of distress and interruption and dysfunction in life a person has because of pain as it's processed through emotional distress and adaptive beliefs. And this is a vicious cycle. And every skilled pain management clinician, whether they're a pain management anesthesiologist or physiatrist or a neurologist or the behavioral medicine people that work through the mind-body connection, this is really clear. It's really well understood. If you go to a well-equipped pain center almost anywhere in the world, they're going to be working with you on your mind-body healing. Okay, so that's been kind of an overview about how chronic pain and chronic illness are really a multi-system, multifactorial problems and how they develop over time. And the important thing to know is that that's part of why these things are workable and why probably you and many other people can actually have significant healing, even though you've done the best of conventional medicine, but you probably haven't looked at it in kind of a holistic and integrative way. And that's where the therapeutic leverage is addressing the different aspects that are all working together. And I talked a bit about the three-part model that I use that looks at 3 M's, which are your movement or mechanical system of your body, your metabolic or biochemical system of your body, and your mind-body system. And we went into a little bit of detail about some of the scientific underpinnings of why your mind-body system is so powerfully integrated in the development of chronic pain and chronic illness, and why it's so crucial to address that in the healing process. Because you or some of the people watching this might have kind of decreased energy or attention span, just because that's part of what chronic illness and chronic pain do. So I'm going to stop now and break this video into two parts. The next part's going to get more into kind of an overview really of what you should be thinking about when you're addressing mind-body healing and the different aspects of it, kind of the landscape and the overview of what mind-body healing is, and some of the places where people sort of fall down, the pitfalls, the things that you can miss if you're not paying attention to it. So that's the next part of this. Go ahead and watch it now if you want to, or you can come back to it later when you have more energy and you want to spend another, I think it's about 20 minutes or so. So as always, feel free to share this video or this blog post wherever you're seeing it. And I'm going to continue to produce information that hopefully is going to be inspiring, empowering, and transformative for you around healing from chronic pain and chronic illness. So if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, do so, and you'll actually get notified when new blog posts come out. And we'll be in touch that way. On my email community, I share various aspects and different things that inspire people. So looking forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot.